The Galactic Administrative Bureau was the largest organization in the known universe. It processed 3 trillion student placements every single year. 3 trillion young beings sent to schools across 400,000 different worlds, with numbers that big mistakes were not just possible, they were certain. Was supposed to go to the Terran Hospitality Institute on Luna Station. It was a nice school for nice people who wanted nice jobs helping tourists visit different planets. She had applied there because she liked helping people. She liked making them comfortable. She liked seeing them smile when she solved their small problems. The transport shuttle did not take her to Luna Station. Instead, it dropped her on a moon called Obsidian 7. The sky was red with volcanic ash. Lightning cracked across clouds of poison gas. The ground shook every few minutes from distant eruptions. The air smelled like burning rocks and old metal. Stepped off the shuttle ramp carrying a floral suitcase. Pink flowers on white fabric. Her grandmother had given it to her. She also wore a cardigan that her grandmother had made by hand. It was soft blue with small white buttons. Her black hair was tied in a simple ponytail. Around her stood beings that did not look soft at all. They were 8 feet tall. Their skulls were covered in bone plates like natural armor. Their muscles were thick as tree trunks. Their eyes were small and angry. They were serpent people. Their scales shimmered with poison. Their fangs dripped venom that could stop a heart in seconds. They moved without making any sound. They were covered in spines. Sharp natural weapons grew from their arms, backs, and heads. They looked like walking weapons. All of them wore dark military uniforms. All of them stared at like she was some kind of joke. A large walked toward her. His name was, and he was the commandant of this place. He had fought in 17 galactic wars. He had scars on top of scars. His 4 eyes looked at her papers, then looked at her, then looked at her papers again. "There must be an error," he said. His voice was deep like thunder. Smiled. It was the same smile she used when customers at her family's restaurant complained about waiting too long for their food. Warm, patient, understanding. "Oh, probably," she said. "But I am already here. It seems like a lot of paperwork to fix it." Had seen soldiers face death without showing any fear. He had watched warriors charge into impossible battles with nothing but courage. But something about this small human smile made him feel strange. Not scared exactly, but not comfortable either. "This is the Void Sentinel Academy," he said slowly. "The deadliest military training facility in the galaxy. Cadets die here, often." "I read the welcome message on the shuttle," said. "It mentioned that. You should not be here. And yet here I am." She lifted her floral suitcase. "Could you tell me where the dormitories are? I would like to unpack before dinner." Stared at her for a long moment. The other cadets watched in silence. Nobody had ever spoken to the commandant like this, not with disrespect, but with something else, something that felt like she was simply ignoring the danger she was in. "Orientation begins at dawn," said finally. "Try not to die before then." "I will do my best," said cheerfully. Then she dragged her floral suitcase toward the large black building that looked like dormitories. Her small wheels made a funny sound on the volcanic rock. The cadets parted to let her through, not out of respect, out of confusion. They did not know what else to do. Her assigned room was small and dark. 2 beds, 2 desks, 1 window showing the red volcanic sky. Her roommate was already there. Was also human. But she was a different kind of human. She came from the Mars military colonies, where children learned to fight before they learned to read. She had cybernetic enhancements under her skin. Her eyes had a slight glow from the targeting systems built into them. Her arms were stronger than any normal human's arms should be. Then she looked at the floral suitcase. Then she watched pull out a stuffed rabbit and place it on the bed. "You are going to die," said. Her voice was flat, not mean, just honest. "Maybe," agreed. She smoothed the rabbit's ears. Her grandmother had given her this too. But not today. Today I am just going to figure out where the cafeteria is. Did you not hear me? This place kills people, strong people, people with weapons and training and augmentations. You have a stuffed rabbit. His name is Machi, smiled at the rabbit. And I am hungry. Do you want to come to the cafeteria with me? Stared at her new roommate. She had seen many types of people in her life. Brave ones, stupid ones, crazy ones. She could not figure out which type was. The cafeteria is in the main building, said, but the food is terrible. That is okay. I have eaten terrible food before. They walked together through the dark hallways. Cadets from dozens of different species watched them pass. Some laughed quietly. Some whispered bets about how long the small human with the cardigan would survive. The popular guess was 3 days. Noticed the stares. She noticed the whispers. She kept smiling anyway. The cafeteria was a huge room filled with long metal tables. The food was a gray paste that contained all necessary nutrients but tasted like nothing. Took a bowl and sat down. Sat across from her. Why are you not scared? Asked. Thought about the question while she ate her paste. It did taste like nothing. She had eaten worse at some cheap restaurants on Earth. Being scared does not help, she said finally. If I am going to die, being scared will not stop it. If I am going to live, being scared will only make living harder. She took another bite. So I choose not to be scared. I choose to solve problems instead. What problems can you solve here? This is a combat academy. You cannot fight. There are always problems to solve. Looked around the cafeteria. She watched how the different species sat in separate groups. She noticed which cadets looked confident and which looked worried. She saw how the staff moved and where the cameras pointed. The first problem is surviving tomorrow's orientation. I should learn more about what that involves. She finished her paste, returned her bowl, and went to find the library. The library was empty. It had been empty for a long time based on the dust. Found a computer terminal and began reading. Academy rules, training schedules, survival statistics, medical reports, equipment lists, historical records. She read until very late. Then she went back to her room, said goodnight to, hugged Machi the rabbit and went to sleep. She was still smiling when her eyes closed. Tomorrow would be interesting. The first week of training would include something called the Crucible. Had read about it in the library. It was a 72-hour survival exercise in the volcanic wastes outside the academy. Cadets were dropped without supplies. They had to survive using only their skills and their bodies. The weak died, the strong returned. That was the way it had always been. Did not like this. She woke up early on her second day and found the logistics office. It was run by a named. This was unusual because did not usually take human names, but had developed a love for Earth television dramas, and he had chosen a name he liked from one of his favorite shows. He looked very tired. Logistics officers always looked tired. I have a question about the Crucible, said politely. Looked at her cardigan. He looked at her smile. He looked at his computer screen like he was hoping she would disappear. You should ask your instructor, he said. I tried. He told me to stop asking questions and prepare to die with honor. That is good advice. I do not think so. Pulled out a tablet. She had borrowed it from the library. I noticed the supply manifest lists emergency rations as optional equipment. Is that correct? Blinked his 4 eyes slowly. Cadets are expected to hunt or forage during the Crucible. I understand, but I also read the planetary survey for Obsidian 7. The local animals are listed as universally lethal, all of them. Every single species that lives outside the academy walls can kill trained soldiers. She scrolled through her tablet. And the volcanic soil supports no edible plant life. Nothing grows here that cadets can eat. Cadets are expected to demonstrate resourcefulness. How can they demonstrate resourcefulness if there are no resources? opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He had never thought about this question before. Nobody had ever asked it. Continued. I also looked at the survival rate for the Crucible. 43% of cadets complete the exercise successfully. That means 57% fail. Most of those failures are deaths. Combat training is dangerous, said. Yes, but those dead cadets represent a significant loss. The Academy spent resources recruiting them, transporting them, housing them, and beginning their training. When they die in the Crucible, all of that investment is lost. She showed him her tablet. I made a spreadsheet. Had never seen a spreadsheet used as a weapon before. I calculated the cost of providing basic emergency rations versus the cost of replacing cadets who die from starvation or from trying to hunt lethal animals. Smiled. The math is very clear. Providing rations would save the Academy money. The Crucible is meant to test strength, said Weekly. It can still test strength. Cadets would still face the volcanic environment, the poisonous air, the dangerous terrain, and each other. They would simply not die from an easily preventable cause. She tilted her head. Unless the point of the Crucible is to kill cadets, is that the goal? No, the goal is to train them. Dead cadets cannot be trained. Stared at the spreadsheet. The numbers were very convincing. He had never thought about training in terms of investment and return before. He had just accepted that cadets died and new ones arrived. I will bring this to the Commandant, he said finally. Thank you, I appreciate your help, smiled and left. The next morning, Commandant made an announcement. Emergency rations would be provided for all Crucible participants. Several instructors looked confused, stood in the corner and refused to meet anyone's eyes. Listened to the announcement while eating her gray breakfast paste, sat across from her, staring. Did you do this? Asked. I just asked a question. Nobody just asks questions here. Maybe they should start. The Crucible began 3 days later. Cadets were divided into squads of 4. The squads were not chosen randomly. Instructors put together groups that they believed would either succeed together or fail together. Squad was clearly meant to fail. Her teammates were the cadets that everyone expected to die. Was a who could not produce venom. A genetic defect had left his fangs dry. Without venom, a was considered worthless by their people. He trembled whenever anyone looked at him. Was a whose spines had been blunted by a childhood disease. They had never grown back properly. Without sharp spines, a could not fight effectively. Other refused to speak to him. Was the 4th member. She was there as punishment. She had been caught fighting with instructors 3 times. They had placed her with the weak squad to humiliate her. This is a death sentence, said as their shuttle flew toward the drop zone. Maybe, said. She was reading something on her tablet. What are you looking at? Planetary survey reports, weather patterns, animal migration data. Looked at her with his serpent eyes. Why? Because knowing things is useful, smiled at him. You are correct. I read about biology in the medical database. Your species has excellent night vision, even without venom. Blinked. Nobody had ever mentioned something good about him before. Yes, we can see heat patterns in complete darkness. That will be very helpful during the night cycles. Made a rough sound that might have been a laugh. You think we will survive until night? I think we will survive the entire Crucible. Put away her tablet. But only if we work together and use our brains instead of our muscles. The shuttle landed. The doors opened. Hot volcanic air rushed in, carrying the smell of sulfur and ash. The landscape outside was black and red and dangerous. The 4 cadets stepped out. The shuttle flew away immediately. They were alone. Other squads had already scattered in different directions, searching for shelter or hunting grounds. Some squads had already started fighting each other for the best locations. We need to move, said. Find cover before nightfall. Wait, was looking at her tablet. According to my research, most squads go north. The terrain is easier there, but the predator density is also highest. So where do we go? East, toward the volcanic vents. Shook his head. The vents are more dangerous, toxic gases, unstable ground. Yes, but the predators avoid that area for the same reasons, and the thermal activity can be used for warmth and cooking. Pointed toward a distant plume of steam. There is a stable vent system about 2 kilometers that way. The geological surveys show it has been stable for 300 years. You trust surveys more than common sense. I trust information more than assumptions. They went east. It was a difficult journey. The ground was hot and cracked. Toxic pools bubbled in random places. Twice they had to change direction to avoid gas vents. But they reached the stable area before nightfall. Had been right. The thermal vents provided warmth. The toxic gases kept predators away. They found a small cave with clean air and settled in for the night. Used his heat vision to watch for dangers. Used his blunted spines to scrape out a more comfortable sleeping area. Set up defensive positions. Distributed the emergency rations and calculated how to make them last 3 days. On the second night, they heard screaming from the north. Another squad had encountered predators. The screaming stopped after a few minutes. On the third day, they walked back to the academy, all 4 of them, alive and healthy. They were one of only 4 squads to return with all members surviving. The other successful squads had lost at least 1 person each. Commandant looked at their squad with his 4 eyes. He looked at specifically. She was still wearing her cardigan under the survival suit. She was still smiling. How, he asked. We prepared, said, and we worked together. That night, sat in his office and thought for a long time. Then he sent a message to his staff. Starting next semester, research methodology would be added to the academy curriculum. In her room, hugged Machi the rabbit and slept peacefully. She was still smiling. 3 months passed at the Void Sentinel Academy, was still alive. This surprised everyone except herself. She had become a problem that the Academy did not know how to classify. Her combat scores were the lowest in Academy history. During fighting practice, she was knocked unconscious so often that the medical staff knew her blood type without checking. They kept a bed ready for her at all times. She could not punch hard enough to hurt anyone. She could not run fast enough to escape anyone. She could not lift the standard-issue weapons. Her physical abilities were, by every measurement, completely inadequate. But she kept smiling, and things kept changing around her. The mess hall was the first thing she changed. For 200 years, the academy had served the same gray paste for every meal. It was complete. It kept cadets alive and healthy, but it tasted like nothing, and eating it felt like a chore. Had done research. She found that 17% of cadets who dropped out cited psychological as their reason. They were not physically weak. They were mentally exhausted. They hated their lives at the academy so much that they preferred to quit rather than continue. She wrote a proposal. She submitted it to the catering committee, which had not actually met since it was created 200 years ago. The proposal explained that better food would improve morale. Better morale would reduce dropout rates. Lower dropout rates would mean more trained soldiers for less money. She included cost analysis. She found suppliers who could deliver ingredients. She created sample menus that provided the same nutrition as the paste but actually tasted like food. The catering committee met for the first time in 2 centuries. They read her proposal. They looked at her spreadsheets. They approved the changes. Within 1 month, the mess hall served actual meals, vegetables, proteins, sauces, flavors. Cadets started looking forward to eating instead of dreading it. Nobody officially thanked for this, but the kitchen staff started giving her extra portions, and the 17% dropout rate fell to 9%. She also started organizing study groups. Combat rankings at the academy were sacred. They determined everything. Higher-ranked cadets got better rooms, better equipment, better job assignments after graduation. Lower-ranked cadets got nothing. Was ranked dead last. She had no hope of improving her combat ranking, but she noticed that many cadets who were good at fighting were terrible at tactics. They could win individual battles but did not understand larger strategies. She started helping them. She shared her research. She explained the tactical manuals that nobody else read. She taught them how to think about problems instead of just hitting them. The cadets she helped started winning more often, not because they got stronger, because they got smarter. This created tension. A named was ranked third in the entire academy. He was huge even by standards. His bone plates were thick and from many battles. He had never lost a fight in his life. He found in the corridor one day and blocked her path. "You are corrupting the order," he said. His voice rumbled like rocks falling. Looked up at him. She was about 1/3 his height. She did not look scared. "What order?" "The ranking system, the strong rise, the weak fall. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked. I have not changed anyone's combat ranking. You are helping the weak become stronger. That is not natural." "Is it bad?" Small eyes narrowed. "The weak should fail, that is the way." "Why?" "Because strength must be proven." "Strength is being proven," gestured at the cadets watching from doorways. Everyone had stopped to see what would happen. "Do you know the who cannot produce venom? The defective one." He memorized every tactical manual in the library, all of them. He did this because he knew he could not rely on his natural weapons. Last week his squad won the combat simulation, not because he fought well, because he predicted what the enemy would do 3 moves before they did it. Smiled. "Is that not strength?" Made a dismissive sound. "Combat strength is what matters. You are being trained to be officers, not soldiers. Officers who can only fight are just soldiers with better titles." She paused. "I read your file, by the way." "You did what?" "Academy records are available in the library. Nobody ever reads them except me." Continued smiling. "You are brilliant at close combat. Your reaction time is in the top 1% of all ever tested, but you have failed 3 resource management assessments. You cannot calculate supply needs. You cannot manage logistics. Those classes do not matter. They matter very much when your soldiers starve because you did not bring enough food." Tilted her head. "Would you like help studying? I could teach you the formulas." Stared at her. She had just insulted him in public. She had pointed out his weaknesses in front of other cadets. By tradition, he should crush her skull for this dishonor. But she was not being cruel. She was offering to help. Her smile was genuine. Her offer was sincere. "You are strange," he said finally. "I have been told this before. Tomorrow, after evening drills, we will study." He walked away. The watching cadets exchanged confused looks. Something had just happened that they did not understand. A fundamental rule of the academy had been broken. Word spread quickly. The third-ranked fighter in the academy was taking study lessons from the last-ranked cadet. Within a week, other high-ranked cadets started approaching. They asked her to help them with their weak subjects: tactics, logistics, communications, strategy. She helped all of them. At the same time, the cadets she had helped before were rising. Was invited to join the tactical planning team. Became the best logistics student in his year. Other weak cadets who had studied with were finding ways to contribute that did not involve fighting. The strict ranking system began to blur. Combat ability still mattered, but other abilities were starting to matter too. Some instructors did not like this. One of them, a veteran named Instructor Minyu, confronted Commandant. "She is destroying our traditions," Minyu said. "The ranking system has worked for centuries." Thought about this. He thought about the reduced dropout rates. He thought about the improved morale. He thought about the squad that had survived the crucible against all odds. "Has she broken any rules?" he asked. "No, but—" "Then let her continue." That night sat in the library with. She was explaining supply chain management using small models she had made from cafeteria scraps. Listened carefully. He asked good questions. He was learning. Across the academy, other study groups were meeting. Cadets were teaching each other, sharing knowledge, working together. Looked out the window at the red volcanic sky. She was still ranked last. She still could not fight. She still had her floral suitcase and her stuffed rabbit and her grandmother's cardigan. But she was changing things, slowly, quietly, one problem at a time. She smiled to herself. Tomorrow she would start working on the equipment maintenance schedules. She had noticed some inefficiencies there. An auditor arrived on a gray shuttle with official seals on its hull. Her name was. She was human, with silver hair and cold eyes that had seen 1,000 bureaucratic crimes. She had spent 30 years fixing administrative errors across the galaxy. She was very good at her job. She walked into Commandant's office and placed a file on his desk. "Of Earth," she said, "registered for the Terran Hospitality Institute, mistakenly transferred to Void Sentinel Academy due to a decimal point error in her student identification number." She opened the file. She should have been corrected and returned within 24 hours of the error's discovery. That was 6 months ago. Why is she still here? Looked at the file. He looked at. He felt uncomfortable in a way he had not felt since his first battle as a young soldier. "There were complications," he said. "What complications? She is a hospitality student. This is a combat academy. The solution is simple: remove her, send her home, process the correction." "She has become integrated into the academy." His eyes narrowed. Integrated how? Tried to explain. He talked about the crucible survival. He talked about the food improvements. He talked about the study groups. He talked about the change dropout rates. Listened without expression. "None of this is relevant," she said when he finished. "Regulations require that administrative errors be corrected. She does not belong here. She must be removed." Before could respond, an alarm began to sound. Red lights flashed throughout the academy. Emergency sirens screamed. A young officer ran into the room. "Commandant, proximity alert. Unknown vessels entering orbit." Was on his feet immediately. Configuration. 6 ships. Formation matches raiders. His face went pale. Everyone knew about the. They were pirates who specialized in attacking military academies. They captured cadets and sold them as slaves or demanded huge ransoms. They had destroyed 3 training facilities in the past 10 years. "Evacuate the students," said. "Evacuation takes 40 minutes. They will be in weapons range in 15. His voice was hard. "We do not have time to run. We must fight." The command center was chaos. Instructors shouted orders. Cadets ran to battle stations. Tactical displays showed 6 hostile ships approaching fast. The academy had defensive systems, but they were old. They had never been tested against a real attack. Stood in the center of the chaos trying to create order. Stood near the wall, watching with worried eyes. She was an auditor, not a soldier. She did not know how to help. Then she noticed something strange. In the middle of all the running and shouting, one person sat calmly at a computer console. She was typing quietly, reading screens, making notes. She was wearing a soft blue cardigan with white buttons. "What is she doing here?" demanded. Looked where she was pointing. "She is part of the tactical response team. She is a hospitality student. She is the best researcher in the academy." His voice was tired. "Let her work." Looked up from her screen. "Their formation is Standard Approach Pattern 7. I read about it in the historical archives. Very predictable." "Predictable is bad," an instructor said. "It means they are confident." "Predictable is good," corrected. "It means we know what they expect." She pulled up a display. Our defensive protocols assume we will use Pattern 7 counter, but they will have anticipated that. They have studied us too. Then what do you suggest? Smiled. I found something interesting. 3 years ago, a cadet named wrote a thesis about using volcanic interference as a weapon. The ash clouds on this moon block normal sensors, but if we bounce our targeting signals off the ash particles in specific patterns, we can create false readings. An instructor shook his head. That thesis was rejected. The math was theoretical. It was never proven. The math was correct. I checked it, pulled up more displays. I also looked at our maintenance logs. We have 6 orbital mirror arrays that have not been used in decades. Everyone forgot about them, but they still work. What good are old mirrors? If we reposition them according to calculations, we can make the think we have 3 times our actual defensive capability. Their sensors will see weapons platforms that do not exist, fleet formations that are not real. That is insane, someone said. It is game theory, replied. They are pirates. They attack weak targets for profit. If we appear strong, the cost-benefit calculation changes. They will retreat because attacking will seem too expensive. You want to bluff them. I want to give them a reason to leave without fighting. Studied the tactical display. He looked at calculations. He thought about the 6 ships approaching with hundreds of armed raiders inside. How long to reposition the mirrors? He asked. 12 minutes if we start now. We have 15 before they reach weapons range. Then we have 3 minutes to spare. Made his decision. Do it. The next 12 minutes were the longest of his life. She directed the mirror repositioning from her console, calling out coordinates and angles. Technicians followed her instructions. The old orbital arrays groaned and shifted into new positions. Was there, using his knowledge of tactical systems to help coordinate, managed the logistics of power distribution, stood guard, ready to fight if the bluff failed, even was present, watching with something that might have been respect. The fleet entered sensor range. They are scanning us, an officer reported. Everyone waited. The displays showed the enemy ships receiving data, processing it, analyzing it. On their sensors, the Void Sentinel Academy appeared to be protected by 18 weapons platforms instead of 6. A defensive fleet of 40 ships seemed to orbit the moon instead of the actual 5 patrol craft. The power signatures suggested military capabilities far beyond what actually existed. 15 minutes passed. Then the fleet broke formation. Their ships turned. They retreated toward open space. Within moments, they jumped to hyperspace and disappeared. The command center erupted in cheers. Cadets embraced each other. Instructors laughed with relief. Even allowed himself a small smile. Watched all of this in silence. Then she walked over to, who was already making notes about how to improve the sensor maintenance schedules. You just saved this academy, said. The mirror saved the academy, and thesis. I just connected some ideas. Looked at the young woman in the cardigan, the hospitality student who should have been learning how to make tourists comfortable, the administrative error that had somehow become essential. The transfer paperwork, said slowly. I seem to have misplaced it. Looked up, administrative errors happen. Yes, they do, almost smiled. I will need to return to my office and search for those files. It might take some time. Take all the time you need. Nodded and walked away. She would file a report saying that the student placement could not be corrected due to processing complications. The Galactic Administrative Bureau would note the issue and move on. Some errors were too expensive to fix. That night the Academy celebrated. Real food, real drinks, real smiles. Cadets who had expected to die were alive and grateful. Sat with her squad. Had joined them too, despite his high rank. They ate together and laughed together. You should be ranked first, said. I cannot fight, reminded him. Fighting is not everything. Tell that to the ranking system. Maybe I will, serpent eyes gleamed. Maybe we all will. Smiled and said nothing. She was already thinking about other problems, other improvements, other ways to help. Outside the window, the volcanic sky flickered with distant lightning. Obsidian 7 was still dangerous. The Academy was still brutal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, everyone was alive. That was enough. 4 years passed at the Void Sentinel Academy. 4 years of training, learning, growing, and changing. 4 years that transformed everyone who survived them. Graduation day arrived on a morning like any other on Obsidian 7. The sky was red with volcanic ash. The ground trembled with distant eruptions. The air smelled like sulfur and metal. Nothing about this moon would ever be gentle or soft. The graduating class assembled in the main hall. Hundreds of cadets stood in perfect rows, wearing their formal uniforms. Warriors with their bone-plated skulls. Soldiers with their venomous fangs. Fighters with their deadly spines. And among them, standing in line like everyone else, was a small human woman wearing a soft blue cardigan under her uniform. Had not changed much in 4 years. She was still small. She still could not fight. Her combat ranking was still the lowest in Academy history. Nobody had ever scored worse in physical assessments. Nobody had ever lost more practice matches. She still had her floral suitcase in her room. She still hugged Machi the stuffed rabbit every night before sleep. She still smiled at everything, including things that should have made her cry. But when her name was called, something unexpected happened. The entire graduating class rose to their feet. Not just her friends, not just the cadets she had helped. Everyone, the warriors, the killers, the strongest fighters in the galaxy, they all stood. They stood for the hospitality student, who had survived the deadliest academy in existence without throwing a single effective punch. Stood in the front row. She was now a decorated combat specialist, ranked among the best fighters her year had produced. Her cybernetic enhancements gleamed under the lights. She had killed 17 enemies in training simulations and 3 real pirates during a second raid 2 years ago. She stood for her roommate. Was there too. The who could not produce venom had graduated first in tactical studies. Fleet Command had already recruited him for their strategic planning division. He would lead armies without ever needing to fight. He stood for the woman who had seen his value when no one else did. Attended as well. His blunted spines had never grown back, but his logistics expertise had revolutionized how the Academy managed supplies. Graduation rates had improved by 12% because of systems he had designed. He stood for the person who taught him that weakness could become strength. Even was present. The Massive had graduated second in combat rankings, just as expected. But he had also graduated first in resource management, first in supply chain logistics, first in strategic planning, things he had never cared about before a small human showed him why they mattered. He stood for his teacher. The room was silent except for the sound of hundreds of feet finding their position. The instructors watched with expressions that mixed confusion and something else. Pride, perhaps, or wonder. Commandant walked to the podium. He looked older than he had 4 years ago, more gray in his remaining hair, more lines on his face, but his 4 eyes were bright with something that might have been satisfaction. 4 years ago, he began, a clerical error sent a hospitality student to this academy. Many of you remember that day. Some of you laughed. Some of you placed bets on how long she would survive. He paused. A few uncomfortable sounds came from the crowd. The popular bet was 3 days. Some generous souls said 1 week. Nobody predicted she would graduate. More silence. She survived, but more importantly, she changed this academy. Not through force. She has none. Not through intimidation. She could not intimidate a kitchen appliance. Scattered laughter. She changed us by asking questions we had stopped asking, by reading reports we had stopped reading, by smiling at problems we had decided were unsolvable. Looked directly at. She showed us that strength has many faces, that a warrior who cannot think is just a weapon waiting to be pointed, that an officer who cannot plan is just a soldier with a fancier title. He gestured, and an aide brought forward a small box. The Galactic Military Council has created a new position, effective today, Strategic Cultural Liaison, someone who bridges the gap between traditional warrior methods and adaptive problem-solving, someone who sees solutions where others see only obstacles. He opened the box, revealing a new insignia. Of Earth, you are its first appointee. Walked to the podium. Her footsteps were quiet on the metal floor. Her cardigan was slightly wrinkled. Her smile was exactly the same as it had been on her first day. She accepted the insignia. She looked out at the standing crowd. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was soft but carried in the silent hall. 4 years ago, I arrived here by mistake, a decimal point in the wrong place, a file in the wrong folder, an error that should have been corrected immediately. She paused. But mistakes are interesting. They show us possibilities we never considered. They force us to adapt, to think, to find new ways forward. She looked at her classmates, at her friends, at the beings who had once expected her to die within 3 days. I was supposed to learn how to make tourists comfortable. Instead, I learned that the most dangerous people in the galaxy are not always the strongest or the fastest. Sometimes they are the ones who pay attention, who ask questions, who read the manuals that everyone else ignores. She lifted the insignia. This position exists because Commandant and others recognized that our old ways were incomplete, that pure combat ability is not enough to win wars, that strategy, planning, research, and cooperation are weapons too. She smiled. I did not create these ideas. I just helped people remember them. She stepped back. The crowd remained standing. Then someone started clapping. It was his massive hands making sounds like thunder. Others joined. The applause grew until it filled the hall, echoing off the walls, shaking the floor. Stood in the center of it, still smiling, still wearing her grandmother's cardigan, still the same hospitality student who had arrived with a floral suitcase and a stuffed rabbit. But also something more. After the ceremony, there was a celebration. Real food, real drinks, real joy. Graduates embraced each other and promised to stay in contact. Instructors shook hands with students they had once tried to break. Inspector attended as a guest of honor. She had returned to officially close the administrative error that had never been corrected. She found standing by a window, looking out at the volcanic sky. 4 years ago, I was ready to transfer you immediately, said. I remember. I would have been following regulations. I would have been correct. Paused. I would have been completely wrong. Regulations serve purposes, said, but purposes change. Regulations should change too. That is not how bureaucracy works. Maybe it should be. Almost laughed. You sound like someone who wants to reform galactic administration. Someone probably should, smiled. But not me, I have other work to do. Appeared beside them holding 2 drinks. She handed one to. The academy wants to keep you as permanent staff, said. Training future cadets, teaching them your methods. I know, asked me this morning. What did you say? I said I would think about it, sipped her drink. There is good work to do here, but there are other academies too. Other places where people have forgotten that thinking is as important as fighting. You want to change the entire military. I want to help where I can, looked at her friend. That is all I have ever wanted. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the volcanic lightning paint the sky in shades of red and orange. Years later, historians would study what they called the doctrine, a revolutionary approach to military training that valued adaptation and knowledge alongside combat ability. They would debate whether it had strengthened galactic forces or weakened traditional warrior cultures. They would analyze data and argue about outcomes. Refused all interviews for these studies. It was not a doctrine, she told once, over drinks in a bar that had once been the Academy mess hall. I was just trying not to die, and helping other people not die. That is all it ever was. That is what makes it terrifying, replied. You smiled at death and asked if it had read the manual. Everyone should read the manual, shrugged. You would be amazed what information is in there. Somewhere in the Galactic Administrative Bureau, a file remained permanently misfiled. A hospitality student's transfer paperwork, forever lost in the system. The clerk responsible had been promoted twice for demonstrating flexibility in procedural interpretation. Some errors, it turned out, were too valuable to correct. And somewhere on a peaceful moon far from any military academy, an old woman sat in a comfortable chair, watching the news. She saw stories about a revolutionary military advisor, a small human woman who was changing how the galaxy thought about strength and power. The old woman smiled and continued knitting. She was making another cardigan, blue with white buttons. Her granddaughter might need a new one soon.